Leaders from Latin American and Caribbean countries met for a summit in Buenos Aires this week as Brazil and Argentina announced plans for a new common currency to promote regional cooperation. With Lula da Silva and other left-leaning leaders coming to power across the region, could this be the start of a new era for Latin America? Hello and welcome to the program from our new studio in Washington, D.C. I'm Rida Fakhri. Argentina this week hosted a major regional summit that brought together leaders from the 33-member Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC. The seventh summit of CELAC saw the return of Brazil, under President Lula, to the regional bloc established in Venezuela in 2011. The government of his predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro, suspended its membership in early 2020, accusing the organization of failing to, quote, protect democracy in its member states. The leaders of the two largest economies in South America, Brazil and Argentina, announced their plans for a common currency to promote regional cooperation. In its final declaration, the summit highlighted the importance of, quote, advancing the process of integration and promoting unity. Now, one of CELAC's member states is Peru, which has been engulfed in a political crisis since the ousting of President Pedro Castillo in December, with protests and violent clashes between the police and some of the poorest communities. Another one, Haiti, has become a failed state, with criminal gangs ruling the streets of Port-au-Prince. So can countries of the region overcome their political instability and move towards greater integration and solidarity, given their socio-economic inequities and disparities? And what are their chances for greater collaboration and integration, which are two of CELAC's main objectives? Joining me now from Buenos Aires to discuss the current political dynamics within Latin America is the coordinator of the CELAC Summit, Ambassador Gustavo Martinez Pandiani, who is also Undersecretary for Latin American Affairs at Argentina's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Pandiani, the return of Brazil to CELAC was celebrated this week. The symbolism and show of unity were very strong. The realignment of the two major economies of the region, Argentina and Brazil, was on full display. But on a more concrete level, what has been achieved at this summit this week for the other nations?
Yes, well, the returning of Brazil to CELAC is a beautiful, beautiful news for everyone, not only for the region, but I believe for the world. With Brazil, we recovered 40% of our economic and political power within CELAC. Remember that Brazil was not participating in CELAC during President Bolsonaro's government. But now, we receive President Lula with a lot of enthusiasm. And we believe truly that with Brazil included, we're going to have a little more capacity when we go on the stage, on the global stage, to talk to the rest of the world.
It all sounds wonderful, and the final declaration also seemed quite positive, but it also looked generic, wasn't it? I mean, there is economic stagnation, as you know, in many countries, high inflation. There is political turmoil as well in many of the countries. So promoting unity and cooperation sounds good, but the reality is that there's a political crisis in Peru. Haiti is now a failed state. We saw how the president returning from Buenos Aires to Haiti had to escape the airport from all the gangs who apparently today control about 60% of the streets of Port-au-Prince. You have instability in Bolivia, not to mention Venezuela, and of course, the never-ending punishing U.S. embargo on Cuba. How is CELAC dealing with all of these issues?
Well, first, Gita, let me tell you that the description you just made, it could be applicable to any part of the world. Every part of the world is affected with economy. We have some political problems. We have, the post-pandemic trauma still in place. So first, let me tell you that the way we deal with it is something we call unity in diversity. In our region, we have different ideological and political perspectives. In fact, within the 33 members, 33 countries that are part of CELAC, you can find every alternative in terms of ideology, in terms of political regime, in terms of political orientation. But the main capital we have, and it's not something superficial if you consider the situation that you are facing now in Europe, is that we deal with it in peace.
But do you deal with it with unity, though? Because there is the situation of Venezuela and the re-recognition of President Maduro, who's been in power almost 10 years now. To what extent is there a consensus among all of the CELAC members that it is time to move ahead and stop sort of the isolation of Venezuela?
Well, we are dealing with that, as you know. We are dealing with that in the conversations we are having in Mexico, in which many countries from CELAC participate and many countries from Europe participate. But let me tell you this, we do not believe in sanctions as a way to solve these problems. We do not believe in violence. We do not believe in invasions. We do not believe in war. And Latin America and the Caribbean, Gira, is a zone of peace. We have a lot of problems. We have a lot of economic problems. We have a lot of social problems. We have a lot of political problems. But we are trying to deal with all of these problems in peace.
You said sure.
Finish, please. With dialogue, with political consultation. And we do not have a war in the middle of a region. And I'm telling you this in the meantime that you have a war in the middle of Europe. So I understand the concerns. Your concerns are our concerns at the same time, but we believe that the best way to solve this situation is to talk to each other, is to respect each other, and we are working on that. We are working on a dialogue process in Mexico with the participation of Norway. Argentina is part of that process as well. Mexico is part of that process as well. So I understand the concerns. Everybody within the region wants democracy, more human rights in every country of the 33 members of the CELAC. But we do not believe that imposing sanctions, excluding people from the system is the right way to go.
Well, let me just take you up on this then, Ambassador, because you say you do not believe in imposing sanctions. Yet we know that the United States has imposed an embargo on Cuba for decades now. Does CELAC have the stomach to exert pressure on the United States? Can you play hardball with Washington?
Well, we include that issue in our Declaration of Buenos Aires, which is a great document we agreed on. Some people are talking about the differences we have. But I can tell you, Gira, that during this week in Buenos Aires, we signed, when I say we, I say the 33 members of CELAC, full consensus. So one of the main issues we agreed on is precisely on rejecting the US blockade to Cuba. And we have been doing that for a long time. That blockade has 60 years of history now. And of course, it's not even, accomplishing any goal in particular.
But will it make any difference whether or not you reject it and whether or not you include that in your joint communique?
The right question, Gira, is will it make any difference if you keep blockading this economy? Apparently, you are not getting anything from the United States. If the goal was to change the regime, I should say that had been not a very successful measure, because 60 years by now, we have the same situation. So if it is not working, probably it's time to find a better solution.
Let me ask you about another critical player in the region, China, which has invested heavily, but some are suggesting that there are signs that China is now investing less than it had been. How dependable a partner is China for the region? And I should note that President Xi delivered a video address at the summit in which he noted, quote, "We highly value our relations with CELAC and take CELAC as our key partner in enhancing solidarity among developing countries and furthering South-South cooperation." How important is China for you today?
It's very important, as it is important the European Union, as it is important Asia, as it is important the African Union, as it is even important the United States.
Not more important, just as important?
As important. And all these countries or group of countries I just mentioned were invited and were part of the summit in Buenos Aires. We have a CELAC that is a very, very united internally, but is very open to the world. We want to be a player in the global scene. And with the return of Brazil now, we believe we could be a player in the global scene. Now, is it the presence of China something different from the presence of the rest of the world? It is not. I mean, of course, we have a global game, in which the superpowers compete with each other. We are not going to be part of that. We are not going to be the table for that conflict.
But we know how much China invests in the region, though, and we know how much the countries of the region import, and we know how much the countries of the region export to China.
But Gita, we have a lot of investment from Canada, from the United States. We have a lot of investment from the European Union. We are interested in all those investments, including the Chinese investment. We are interested in those markets. We are interested in those opportunities. We are not playing one side of the table. We are trying to get our national interest in the center. We are trying to put our regional interest in the center of the game, and we will keep doing so.
You just said we're not playing one side, presumably against the other. But let me ask you about the idea that was floated just a few days ago in Buenos Aires by Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez and Brazil's Lula da Silva about a regional common currency. A lot of people are looking at this with a lot of skepticism, saying it's a pie in the sky, that the aim is to challenge the US dollar and America's perceived hegemony in the region, but that it isn't going to go anywhere. Are you setting yourself up to a political confrontation with the United States if you go ahead with this?
That is not the aim at all. We are not doing anything just to oppose anyone in particular. Again,
what's the fundamental aim then of this common currency?
Well, if you let me answer your question, I will. We are not doing anything in particular just to oppose someone in the global scene. The question of the currency is not a question to oppose the dollar, the US dollar, or the Chinese currency, or any other one. The idea of the currency, first of all, is to try to get a little more stability for our economies. We are not thinking to have a common currency tomorrow or next year. We are in the middle of a long time process. We just started the conversations. The first step between Argentina and Brazil is to try to compensate our foreign trade without using any dollars or any other currency, just using our own currencies in order not to depend too much on the foreign currencies. It's not a problem that we are facing because of someone else. It's something we are doing among ourselves. It's important, Gita, that you understand and everybody understand that we believe we have the right to take our own decisions, to make our own decisions. We do not do everything just looking into your own mirror. We are doing what we believe is best for our countries.
How do you respond, though, to the critics who suggested that this announcement, this, in their words, flamboyant announcement, was designed to bring attention to what they suggest is an otherwise inconsequential summit?
My answer is very simple. They are wrong. That is not our intention. We will keep working in getting more stability for our economies. And one chapter of that plan is related to our currencies. And we will try to have a little more stability together with Brazil, and we are ready to do so.
Finally, Ambassador, how would you describe Latin America's place in the world today and its relationship with its two strategic partners, the US and China?
Well, we are in our own place. We are in the place we believe we should be, respecting our own peculiarities in terms of our political orientation, our ideological orientation. We have 33 countries within CELAC. In those 33 countries, Gita, you could find conservative regimes, liberal regimes, more progressive regimes, but the key there is what we call unity in diversity. We respect each other. We try to solve our problems peacefully. We do not want to use any type of violent measure to solve our problems. Some parts of the world are facing a very extremely dangerous war, which is affecting us. So there is exactly our place. we don't want to be part of the confrontation. We are not part of the global confrontation. We are trying to get the best what we can do for our own people.
But you do mention the political differences among the 33 member nations. Could these divisions, one could describe them as, could they continue to limit the bloc's ability to deepen regional integration, which is one of your key aims?
Well, it's a challenge, but we are facing the challenge. Sometimes it's a little hard because it's difficult to agree on certain issues. But if you read the Declaration of Buenos Aires, you will have more than 100 agreements in issues such as gender, climate change, post-pandemic recovery, human rights, energy transition, and all those agreements are there regardless the difference we have.
Ambassador Pandiani, coordinator of the CELAC summit and Under Secretary for Latin American Affairs at the Argentine Ministry of Foreign Affairs with a 3-decade career in diplomacy. A pleasure to have you on the program today. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure, and I thank you.
So just how influential is this group of 33 Latin American and Caribbean states now that Brazil is back in the fold? With a population of over 650 million people and a $3.5 trillion GDP, CELAC is the third largest economic power in the world. It is the largest food producer and third largest producer of electricity. Brazil is the largest economy in Latin America. It represents roughly a third of the region's GDP. It is also the world's largest exporter of beef and second largest exporter of grain. Lula's government has vowed that its first action is to rescue millions of people from malnutrition. At the end of 2020, 9% of Brazil's population went hungry. That's almost 19 million people. That figure increased to over 15%. That's 33 million in 2022. Around 67% of Chile's copper exports and 70% of Brazil's soybean exports go to China. More than 60% of Uruguay's beef is exported to China as well. Meanwhile, China's banks have provided more than $138 billion in loans to Latin America between 2005 and 2020. Trade between Latin American countries and China grew from $12 billion in 2000, that's 0.6% of the region's GDP, to $444 billion in 2021. That's 8.5% of GDP, when China accounted for 18% of Latin American trade, up from 5% in 2005. While the US remains Mexico's top trading partner, Brazil, Chile, and Peru all run trade surpluses with China. The 7th summit meeting of CELAC, the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, was held under auspicious signs, with the return of Brazil and a constellation of left-leaning governments in power across the region, from Brazil to Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, not to mention Cuba. But that alone cannot guarantee success. Political majorities come and go. But what marks this summit is Brazil and Argentina's announcement to seek to advance discussions on a common South American currency to be used in trade and financial transactions right across the region. Not a South American euro, but a currency for trade to replace the US dollar. For sure, this will not happen overnight, and it is fraught with danger. For Washington, this could be a red line, even if it doesn't say so aloud. That's all from me, Rida Fakhri, and the team. Thanks for watching.